of all the operations that are managed within the support operations bureau, so for example you mentioned lead was a new one. So
Hmm.
when there is a new program introduced, so are you also a part of that introduction of that program, or everything is pre-planned and you just have to implement
Yeah,
or carry on with it?
I would be heavily involved. When we expand that program,
Mm-hmm.
I would be introducing that program within the agency and
Mm-hmm.
also outside the agency as well.
Okay. Okay,
So I
so
would be
lead was.
I
Mhm.
would
Yeah.
I would be presenting that through um, public service announcements and meetings with our constituents or stakeholders outside, and there are we rely on heavily on outside um, partners
Mm-hmm.
that provide services like mental health services,
Yeah.
counseling, drug treatment.
Mm-hmm.
We I would be working with them and socializing that program to them as well, so they know what we're capable of, where
Okay.
what our capacities are.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And so apart from that, special investigation section, we discussed that you improved the way investigations were conducted to speed up, case completion, I would say. So other than that, any particular operation that you were able to improve in terms of performance?
Not yet. Nothing that I can
Mhm.
measure
Yeah.
today.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so since the all the officers you have are responsible for submitting the statistical analysis in terms of reporting, so do you have to conduct some analysis on your own as well to assess staffing needs or any departmental needs, or do you think that's covered in the budget
No, I
analysis that?
do. I do
Mhm.
analyze. I do analyze it. I do a workload analysis just to make sure that we, if we're staffed appropriately.
Mhm.
So I will look at how efficient we're being with our resources.
Mhm.
It would be our number one resources is our people. So
Yeah.
are we getting the most out of our people? Are they being underutilized, or are they being overtaxed? Are we working beyond their ability, and it's creating things like delays? And that was with our cases. I was looking at, are
Mhm.
we staffed appropriately? But the first thing is, where's the you know where are the to get a complete picture is what's the complete uh, timeline for a case, and what's the workflow, how does it work through the process, so that I can see we're efficient, where we can improve.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, and from the key accomplishment section, anything that was a part of this current position that we haven't discussed?
No, not in this one. No.
Okay. So do you think we can move on to the next position then?
Sure.
Okay, and then you were the Captain Emergency Operations Bureau. So yeah, so in terms of operations here, or like what sort of operations were these? And again, what was your role all about there?
This just kind of go down the line. The first was air support. So we have at the time we had upwards of two, 5 helicopters
Mm-hmm.
that we were coordinating. Uh, there were 3 different airframes that we
Mm-hmm.
had. So there were um, each of them has different maintenance and different training for the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
We fly upwards of we're flying um, 18 hours a day of flight
Okay.
coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to coordinate all of the training for the pilots. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would look at all of the flight risk assessments,
Mm-hmm.
because before every flight, the pilot would do a what they call a FRAT, which is a flight risk assessment tool, and we would determine what the risk for the flight was.
Mm-hmm.
And if it scored a certain level, then they would need my approval to be able to fly.
Okay.
and that's for safety.
Mm-hmm.
So within air support, one of the first things that I did is when I came in, I observed that our safety officer was not as engaged, and we were not accomplishing what we needed to do as far as our safety. So I
Mm-hmm.
brought the safety officer in, and I analyzed their position and implemented a regular training exercise to test
Mm-hmm.
our safety, which is a full scale exercise.
Okay.
Implemented a safety audit
Mm-hmm.
of all of our maintenance and flight,
Mm-hmm.
and I had that report put together so that I could determine where we were on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that worked real closely with that was our search and rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So we're responsible for for search and rescue operations for all of Clark County.
Mm-hmm.
So anything from Lake Mead to Mount Charleston, and that doesn't mean anything to you, but
Mm-hmm.
we coordinate anything. So anytime a helicopter was used or anytime any kind of rescue came on, they
Mm-hmm.
would brief me on the details of the rescue,
Mm-hmm.
and I would make the determination whether or not we were going to use a helicopter in that rescue, or we would use some other tool. Where we would use a ground operation or an air operation,
Okay.
and so we looked at factors like the weather, the time of day, the area where the rescue would be, what the nature of
Mm-hmm.
the injuries would be. So if somebody that had critical injuries or life-threatening injuries would be more
Mm-hmm.
critical to get out there. So I was the final say on that.
Okay.
In our canine, we had 18 dogs
Okay.
for patrol that we have out, and I
Mm-hmm.
coordinated all of the purchases of our dogs. I think while I was there, I had
Mm-hmm.
to find funds to buy 7 different dogs,
Mm-hmm.
patrol dogs and detector dogs. So we had a vendor that we had to work with to
Yeah.
ensure that we had good quality dogs.
Yeah.
For our hazardous materials unit, that was a section called armor, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a hazmat unit, and we actually do an all hazards, anything from chemical substances to powder substances, to explosives, basically anything in the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, or explosive realm, CBRN.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would respond out on the more critical events to provide the higher level of oversight.
Mm-hmm.
I coordinate the training for the officers. I didn't
Okay.
I wasn't the one who was providing the training, but I was coordinating with the vendors.
Mm-hmm.
We would coordinate several grants to purchase
Mm-hmm.
equipment, and some of those grants would be state grants, some of those would be federal grants that had different
Okay.
levels of reporting and spending. So I would be the final budget level approval for our bureau before we send it off to our finance.
Okay.
And then with each of those sections, each of
Mm-hmm.
them had their own separate budget. So each of those budgets would be prepared and submitted separately for and it'd be managed in the same way that that support operations was. But we'd be
Uh-huh.
preparing a budget for each unit and doing forecasting the same way that we would for the other.
Okay. Okay, great. And in terms of working with the vendors, so were these vendors already, I would say, uh, some trusted vendors that were already in place, or did you have to source vendors as well?
We were using a current vendor, but we were also looking at a process that we implemented that we didn't have a chance to use while I was there
Mm-hmm.
to vet and source new vendors for the dogs.
Okay.
So we created a process with finance and our legal department to allow us the ability to test and evaluate the dogs before we would um, actually purchase them.
Okay. Okay, great. And so in any way were you trying, analyzing the quality of services that were being provided by the vendors?
Um, on our dogs, yes, I would look at how the dog was uh, basically becoming absorbing our
Mm-hmm.
training,
Yeah.
and if the dogs did not um, fit our standard, we
Mm-hmm.
would coordinate for a replacement or a refund.
Okay. Okay, great. So any
And
other
we would
thing
do that
from this?
basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
No, no, that's it for this unit.
Okay. Okay.
One
And
of our biggest
yeah.
accomplishments there was building the relationship building with the city fire department, because they're the ones who
Yeah.
have the bomb squad for our valley. So
Yeah.
I built relationships with their command staff
Mm-hmm.
that we hadn't had previously. Those relationships.
Oh,
There
okay.
was always some animosity between the two agencies on
Okay.
those kind of events.
Okay. And so, did that involve reaching out to their heads and, coordinating with them and building that
Yes,
relationship?
yes,
Hmm. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So can we move on to the next one then?
please.
Okay. So you were the captain, organizational bureau, and yeah, this one is, pretty understandable that you were managing and leading all aspects of the departmental training. And so,
Hmm.
which training aspects are covered? Like, were you responsible for developing the training curriculum as well?
No, I didn't develop the training curriculum. My staff did.
Mhm. Okay.
Like we would have for our advanced officer skills training and our reality-based training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, each year, we would conduct an analysis on what the trends were uh, in law enforcement. What are the
Mm-hmm.
threats that officers are facing, and then we
Mm-hmm.
would develop training scenarios and training to address uh, those those uh, those issues, so that we would be preparing our officers. So
Mm-hmm.
when they would do that analysis, I would be the final approval for that training before it got implemented for that calendar year.
Okay.
Um, for our academy, while I was there, one of the very first challenges that I was presented with was
Mm-hmm.
we had not hired a significant amount of officers in um, on a long time, but the sheriff was
Mm-hmm.
successful in lobbying the county and the state for additional tax revenue for to provide officers for public safety.
Mm-hmm.
So we created a program. We were training basically with one squad, one sergeant, and one group of 5 officers.
Mm-hmm.
We grew that to 3 additional squads and uh, another 18 officers. We had 4 squads, 4
Great.
sergeants, 6
Mm-hmm.
6 officers on each squad, that we started one academy every month.
Mm-hmm.
And we started that. We were able to, the academies were 50 to 60
Mm-hmm.
recruits, and we were able to put over 600 recruits in over a year.
Okay.
Challenges that we were faced with was logistic challenges with our
Mm-hmm.
building.
Yeah.
So I created a schedule so that we were training on 2 shifts, on day shift and swing shift.
Mm-hmm.
We realized that our facility was too small, so we had to find another. We found another small office complex that we did
Okay.
a build out, leased the space, and we're able to create another, a satellite area for the officers to do defensive tactics.
Okay.
We did a complete overhaul of all the classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
We
Okay.
upgraded all the classrooms with audio visual equipment,
Mm-hmm.
computers, so that we would be, and new desks, chairs, basically create new spaces for all of them. And that
Yeah.
cost just over $1 million to get that started.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
We were able to get that done. We were given the challenge in November of 16, and we started our first academy of that kind in February of 17. So in 90 days,
Great.
we were able to get all that turned around.
Perfect. Great. Okay. And so, the trainings that you just mentioned, that, okay, there were some internal trainings for the officers that you thought that were necessary, given, what were the challenges out there. So, like, what were some of the trainings that you introduced, I would say?
Well, we had we do different scenarios. They're
Mm-hmm.
scenario-based training. So
Mm-hmm.
we created some training for marijuana laws with the legalization of marijuana. We did an online created an online training class.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to do that in like 30 days
Mm-hmm.
to create a program for the officers to get some basic training. And then we had,
Okay.
as the year progressed and we had more clarification on the law, we provided additional online training on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To anyone other than that?
What else was we doing in there? Well, we were working on a new training management system.
Mm-hmm.
We had a vendor identified that we had evaluated, but we entered into contract with them, but then it didn't work out. So
Okay.
after I left, we had to change direction again.
Okay.
But that did require a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Well, training is going on like every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We
Exactly.
had one of the logistical challenges of commanding that bureau is that we had, let's see, 5 different campuses that we trained on
Mm-hmm.
that were
Yeah.
spread out throughout the valley.
Mm-hmm.
So we were separated, geographically separated,
Yeah.
and they're all high level